Okay, in our next segment of interview, Ask an Archer, we have a very special guest here. Someone who's not that easy to track down, but once we did reach him, he was very happy and cooperative to come on the show, I guess. Bede Dwyer, he is, I guess some would consider him maybe an elder statesman of the traditional archery world, possibly. Extremely knowledgeable, source of experience and knowledge in all things traditional. We're going to cover a number of his specialities, his interests in this talk, and I'm sure we won't get through everything, so we'll see if we do a part two. But Bede, anyway, thank you for joining me. We're very happy to have you with us.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's just have a very quick bio about yourself, because there's actually not too much available online. You don't have that much of a big social presence, which is sometimes a good thing nowadays.
Yes.
So
I did work in work security for a while. Maybe a little bit more sensitive than most.
Okay, that's probably sensible. But if you give us maybe kind of a quick rundown of how you got into archery and what type of archery interested you, and kind of what pushed you to stick with it, after all these years.
Well, I mean, like a lot of young children, I was interested in archery, probably from watching television programs and things like that. And in my mid-teens, I was looking through an encyclopedia and it had a number of Mughal miniatures in it. And I recognized bows and arrows in them, but they were nothing like anything I'd ever seen. So I decided to find out, what was happening with Persian and Turkish and Arabic and Northern Indian archery, and later on Chinese, Mongolian and Korean. And it turned out to be really quite a complex and interesting experience. And through doing it, I met lots of really interesting people and really generous people with their time and their knowledge. So it was very fruitful.
Excellent. So this obviously opened up a lot of doors for you of interest in terms of, we spoke before, bow making, quiver making, even arrow making, and then into flight archery and all these type of aspects. Let's just look. I think you mentioned one of your primary interests was Persian and Mughal archery. Is that correct?
Well, it was basically, that there was, like, culturally there was a kind of Turco-Persian continuum. From the Ottoman Empire in the west down into the Mughal Empire in the southeast. And they had similar cultural and linguistic links. So Persian was spoken in not just in Iran, but in Ottoman Turkey for quite a long time in court areas, and also in northern India. By which I mean the subcontinent, not just the current country of India.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So there was a large Persian, linguistic presence, plus a large number of people in Iran spoke Turkish, and the language of the Mughal emperors in their family was Chagatai Turkish. So there's this kind of quite a multicultural thing going on for a long time. Later on, when I tracked down information on Mongolia and worked with Stephen Selby on his book on Chinese archery, we could see parallels. We could see transfers of information. There was a lot of parallels to start off with, but because I'd read a lot of the Arabic and Turkish source material, mostly in translation, because I'm a terrible linguist. You could see things where there were direct transfers of information and things like this. So this seemed to be like a technology and a cultural activity that was very very connected across all these different civilizations.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
it just seemed like a very interesting thing to follow up on. And I was interested in history, and you kind of read about things happening and want to know how they worked. And archery is the one thing where you can actually shoot a bow with an arrow that's a war arrow, and not, I mean, if you fight with sharp swords, you could kill somebody. But if you shoot at a target with an arrow, it doesn't matter, what kind of arrowhead it has, the target's not going to care.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
You can get a lot closer to what people really did.
Yeah, this is something that I was talking to Dr. Morat Osveri about when we did the interview. He likes to look at, when he's looked through his manuscripts and his historical documents of how the bows were made, how they performed, speed, etc., and accuracy. He wants to actually experiment with it today and see if they can replicate that. So I think he called it experimental history, where you can try and put these things to the test and actually see, well, could they really shoot, 10 arrows in 5 seconds, or could they really shoot, flying discs and all these type of things, or shoot through like a little glass, the base of a glass or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a really interesting one, because in one of the Persian manuscripts, there was a description on how they did that.
Wow.
And right. I was talking to a fellow archer, Western archer, and I said, "Oh, yeah, they used to shoot through glasses without shattering the glass." And he said, "Oh, yeah, we used to do that with 22s." I said,
"All right.
How did you do it?" and it's a matter of putting something in the glass and everything like that, and
right.
using flat-headed arrows, so that the arrow, if it's got a sharp point, it shatters, but if it's got a flat head, it punches a hole.
Okay.
And
right.
And we were just, that was two totally different traditions that totally unrelated. I went, oh, wow.
Interesting.
But when we were doing the translations of the Persian manuscripts, we'd come across things that explained references that you might see in Mustafa Khani in Turkish, or in Taibuka well, there's two versions of Taibuka that are published in English. There's the Latham and Patterson Saracen Archery from 1970, which is one of the best English translations of an Arabic work. Yeah. And there's another English and Turkish translation by Kurtuluş of the Mamluk Kipchak version of the same book. So it wasn't just an Arabic copy of it, because most of the Mamluks spoke a dialect of Kipchak, or some were speaking Turkmen dialects as well. They actually wrote one out in that dialect.
Interesting.
And this Turkish professor went through and did this beautiful translation in modern Turkish and English, with a complete discussion of all of the way the words were used, and referred it back to the Arabic one from Latham and Patterson. Really beautiful piece of scholarship. Excellent. And quite a practical thing about how to shoot, which was really good. He also did a really excellent translation of a summary of some of the earlier books on Furusiyya, which had horse riding, lance work, archery, how to cut with your sword from horseback, all this kind of useful stuff that we use every day.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, to think there was a time when that was kind of the norm, those type of disciplines and skills. But now we kind of just read about it, really, or we dabble in it.
I mean, some things survive. Like the style of horsemanship in Afghanistan and Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, used in Buzkashi, is very much that old style of horsemanship. The style of horsemanship in Morocco and Algeria is very much that classic Arabic horsemanship.
Right.
There's a very good book on that. If you're going to do horse archery, you can do it two ways. You can ride on a Western saddle, and by Western I mean either American Western or a English, German, modern saddle and use modern bridle and reins and everything and try and get there. Or you can use the traditional techniques and traditional saddles and traditional bridles. I mean, in Mongolia, you can do horse archery and everything you're using is traditional.
Right.
So that, there's richness in it. You don't have to kind of limit yourself to what you can buy in a shop.
You're
prepared to put a bit of effort into learning how to make things.
Certainly. And I mean, that's something that, you've dabbled with yourself, trying to make, quivers. Did you get into saddles as well? Did you make saddles? Oh, right. Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Yeah. So, bridles, I mean, for that, you need to obviously know a little bit about leather work and tools. And did you have that experience already before, or did you just kind of jump in and learn as you went along?
No, what it was friends. I said, I want to make a quiver like this, but I don't know how to do leather work. And one of my friends said, well, you draw up the design and I'll sew it up and show you how it's done, and then you'll know how to make one for yourself.
Got you.
So I got a quiver. And then another friend said, well, if you want to make boots of the right type of boots, I can show you how to make moccasins. You might be able to learn how to make boots from that. So I did. And it just grew like that.
Yeah.
A few of us decided to do horse archery back in the day, which is about 35 years ago.
Right.
And we bought military saddles because the people who owned horses said, they're not going to hurt a horse's back. This is a safe one. And then we modified them to change the seat shape so it was more suitable for horse archery.
Okay.
And we made bridles so that we could test out whether the bridles that we saw in the museums and in the miniature paintings actually worked, which they did. And we then found out what it was like to wear a bow case and quiver on horseback.
Right.
What were the problems? And there were problems. Because when you're sitting on a horse, your legs aren't like that, they're like that.
Right, yeah.
So everything that was straight and parallel when you were standing on the ground kind of went behind you and got tangled up.
Right.
Turned out that wearing a sword under a bow case was one of the best things you could do to stop your bow getting tangled up with your arrows. But,
interesting.
All kinds of stuff like that.
Wow, awesome. That's amazing. So, I mean, you've always been based in Australia, but I guess you had to travel to, maybe Turkey, Iran, Persia, to try and find out some of this information, and then you brought it back with you?
Most of the information you could get through books. When the internet came along, it became a lot easier, but unfortunately there was a lot more misinformation.
Yeah.
Because to get a book published, you had to convince a lot of people that you knew what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But to write something on the internet, you just have to write something on the internet, and there's a lot of,
dodgy
distraction.
Stuff. Yeah.
But what happened was I did all this research, and for my own interest. I wasn't interested in teaching people or anything because I didn't think anyone else would. Back then, there might have been 10 of us in the whole world.
Wow, yeah.
And, I mean, this is before people like Kashai in Hungary and that started their stuff.
Yeah,
it was a long time before that.
Yeah.
And people were interested a bit. Like horsemen were interested in doing something different on a horse.
Right.
And in fact, it's a lot easier to teach a horseman to shoot a bow than it is to teach an archer to ride a horse.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The horsemanship skill is more important, I guess, in that relationship.
It's familiarity. Yeah. It's the comfort.
Yeah.
It's the comfort on being on the horse.
Mm.
The horses themselves rapidly acclimatize themselves to bows and arrows. We used to go out in the field where there are quite a few horses in the next field, and we'd shoot whistling arrows straight up in the air. And whistling arrows, when you shoot them straight up in the air, they're really loud. And then as they slow down to the top, they stop making a noise. Then they start to fall and they tip over, so they go down point first, and then they start making noise, and it gets louder and louder, and then they hit the ground. All the horses used to come around to watch.
Oh, really? Oh, they were not even scared of it then?
No, they thought it was something interesting.
Okay, interesting.
So, it was quite a good thing. But we were not in the situation of going to a riding school where there were horses in stables. We had friends and they had horses on their property, and you had to walk about 2 kilometers to find the horse, convince it to come over with some carrots or something, put a bridle on it, ride it bareback to where the saddles were, saddle it up, do all your stuff, and then do the whole thing in reverse.
Oh man!
And so you really got a lot of exercise. It was it was pretty good, and it wasn't all flat ground, so we had deep gullies and all this kind of stuff. So
it sounds amazing. I mean, in the UK here, one of the things I mentioned to a few other people is that when we've tried to do horseback archery here, it's been quite difficult. One, because access to horses. I mean, we have horse stables, of course, but here it's all very kind of official and regimented, and you have to go to a riding school and learn riding, which of course is a good way. But then there's a cost involved. Not many people here have. Firstly, land is a lot smaller than where you are, right? So it's a lot more constricted. So it's not as if we have people who've got acres and acres of land and they just put a couple of horses on there. And then, going to the riding school, it's not the cheapest activity to do in the world.
No.
And then when we do
Nor is it the safest.
Well, no, exactly. Well, for the rider, not necessarily for the horse. But
but it has the highest serious accident rate of any sport.
Horse riding, yeah. I mean, it can do some serious accidents. But then when we started to speak to different horse stables owners, and the moment we said horse archery, it totally switched them off because, understandably so, they were concerned about the horse's safety and insurance and are we covered and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess your experience of just being able to go to a mate's house where they've got all this land and horses must have been quite amazing. They have different breeds in Australia, right? Do they have breeds specifically found in Australia, or were those breeds brought over from mainland elsewhere?
All horses in Australia were imported originally. There were no placental mammals in Australia aside from rats and bats.
Wow.
And seals.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so this is a whole different place.
Oh, man.
But what they did was they brought in horses from all over the place. So in the early period of colonization, they brought horses from nearest places they got horses like Arab horses and that in, because the English to sail from England to Australia often stopped in India.
Right.
And they brought stuff out. And over time, a number of horse breeds developed. One of them, the military horse, the Whaler, named after New South Wales, one of the states here, was then bred in such numbers that it was shipped back for the British Army, particularly in India to use, but also elsewhere. And
were they quite sturdy, strong horses? Yeah.
Really, really tough. Yeah. Reasonably sized too. See, the problem that we ran into with horse archery is that tall horses are not good for horse archery because their legs are too long.
Yeah, and you have too much.
You get too much movement.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I've come to the conclusion, looking at old photographs, there aren't a lot of old photographs of horse archers standing next to their horses. There are a few from the Caucasus. And looking at photographs of horses and horsemen from the 19th century when things were still traditional, the horses were rarely higher than the man's shoulder.
Right.
When he was standing next to it. So that would be, for me, that would be a 14, 15 hand horse.
Right.
Because I'm only 166 centimeters tall, right? I'm short. So strangely enough, I came across a Turkish census from the 1890s, and I'm tall for a Turk
really?
in the 1890s. Yeah, because the average male height, this is average, so it's there was a big range.
Yeah.
But the average male height was 160. And the average height, I think, for the Austrian and Hungarian hussars to get into the hussars, you had to be, I think it was under 75 kilos and about 165 in height. Any taller than that, you were too big for raiding or reconnaissance and that, because your horse is tired out too much.
I see. Yeah.
And even in medieval times in Europe, knights' destriers were nowhere near as big as people think. Those big horses like Clydesdales and stuff like that, they were bred to pull wagons in the 18th and 19th century. They didn't exist back when knights were hopping around. And so there's a lot of, when we try and do horseback archery now, we run into problems that we can't, you just wouldn't think about. Because it's just not a thing. I mean, you go to Mongolia, the horses are probably shorter now than they were in the old days, but not by much. But simply because when there was powerful states, they looked after breeding horses, and when the states collapsed, the horse breeding, the stallions disperse, and there's no concentrated, because there's no economic value in producing the higher grade horses.
I see.
And so it's like when European horses got loose in America and formed the herds of Mustangs, their average height decreased because they weren't getting as much food.
I see. Okay, they're not very big horses, are they? The Mustangs.
Not well, some are, but most. The average in the old days, I'm not quite sure what it's like now, because there's not as much free land for them to run around on. See, we have wild horses here, which are feral horses that were brought here, and their offspring escaped and formed herds up in our alpine areas. And they're quite a tough little horse. Actually, they'd be excellent for horse archery. And sometimes they're captured and trained rather than, being culled because they damage pasture and whatnot. And those horses would be excellent. But the one thing that I did find, Stephen Selby came out here a few years ago looking to buy horses for horse archery in Hong Kong. And Australia was one of the few places that you could import horses from to Hong Kong, because of its racing industry was so important. They couldn't afford to get any diseases in there. But the problem was, if you wanted to ride a horse in Hong Kong, the only horses there to ride were ex-race horses. Which are really tall and very skittish. And he was doing quite well, but really it was fighting an uphill battle with these inbred and somewhat neurotic horses. And again, the height, the balance of leg length, the body length, the fact that because their legs were so long, their gallop was so fast, that if you did a course, like we know the measured courses for horse archery because they were written down in regulations and things like that. If you did that course on a thoroughbred, you'd have harder time to shoot the second or third arrow because the horse would be moving too fast.
Right.
So
there's definitely a correlation, an important correlation between the dimensions of the rider and the horse. You can't just kind of jump on any horse and things will work
on a given horse. I mean, the horse can carry the person. And Arab horses were famous for being able to carry quite big people without seeming discomfort. But you'd really want to get a horse that was appropriate to your height. So if you're a very tall person, I mean, I've got friends that are 6'7", 6'8", and you're not going to put them on them on a thoroughbred. They could ride it the way a Mongol rode a Mongol pony, because the proportion of their legs and everything would be right. But like me sitting on a thoroughbred, I can't get my legs in the right position around the horse's body to have the stability to stand up in the saddle to shoot. I mean, I can shoot, but it's just, like I'm sitting in a chair or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's not as comfortable as you would want.
I saw a really interesting case when I was in America once, at one of the horse archery festivals in Fort Dodge, Iowa, where people came, brought their gear, but they were provided horses by the people running the festival. And they had 3 girls out from Japan who were doing traditional Japanese horse archery.
Oh yeah,
they were properly trained. Yeah. I mean, they were really well trained. And these horses, I think they're bigger than the native Japanese horse, but I think most people riding horses in Japan now are riding, again, horses derived from thoroughbreds. But they were riding extremely fast and shooting just perfectly.
Wow.
And that was the thing where probably the horses were a little bit big for them, but they had the skill.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, because at the same time, there were other people demonstrating other forms of horse archery there.
Yeah. And
there was a big difference between this totally traditional one and the ones where people have invented new horse archery contests and that. And the kind of stress on speed and precision wasn't so great.
Yeah.
Because now the stress is on how many arrows you can shoot, which isn't quite the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's actually probably quite a hotly contested topic, nowadays, with, the advent of Kasha coming in, and there's a lot of kind of back and forth saying that, his and we're not kind of trashing anyone, but it's just what people have observed is that I guess his approach was more sport orientated. It was how many arrows you can get off, and it was all centered around the rules that he made. Whereas other people would say that, well, that's not the historically kind of correct how it was done, right? Would you say? Yeah,
well, Kasha had a really interesting series of things that he did. For one, he went back to shooting with the fingers, which, strangely enough, is historically correct for Hungarians.
Right.
Because there was a Burgundian traveller who went through Hungary in the 1430s, and he had gone through Ottoman Turkey. This is before the fall of Constantinople, when the capital was Edirne.
Right.
He went through Ottoman Turkey, noticed how the Turks shot. When he came up from Jerusalem, he came up with the Mameluke who was going to visit his relatives, and he got a quiver and thumb ring and all this kind of stuff. And so he's going through Hungary, and he noted that the Hungarians drew with 2 fingers.
Interesting.
Not with the thumb.
Right.
And so it was quite interesting, because this is an actual person that was there.
Yeah.
And when you see that, you realise that Kasha is on the right track there. Traditional Hungarian archery, even the Kipchaks, before the Mongol conquest, when the Kipchaks and Kuman were pressing on like both fighting and allying with the Russian states, Kiev and things like that, they were probably not using thumb ring archery either. Because I was talking to several people who'd excavated tombs.
Oh yeah.
And never found a thumb ring, ever.
Wow.
Yet,
interesting.
The first thumb ring that I know of from like Soviet archaeological excavations and that was 14th century, right in the Mongol period. So because the Turks that went into Iran basically came from the southern branches, whereas the Kipchaks and the Kyrgyz, and that they were the northern branches, which were more connected with the taiga forests and things like that. So they were culturally different people, even though they had related languages and in many ways related methods of warfare. But there were small things that were different.
Yeah.
And thumb ring uses, I wrote an article many years ago called Early Archers' Rings, in which I'd read all this stuff about how thumb rings were used. Yeah. And this is in histories in English, and German. And there's all this stuff. And I thought, oh, great. I'll be able to go back and I'll be able to find these things and I'll put it all together in one thing and it'll all make sense. And then I found out that 50% of it was just mistakes. People saw something.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote about it. Somebody else read that, but thought it was something slightly different. And it was like Chinese whispers. By the time it got into some major publication, it was totally crazy.
Something else, yeah.
So I was looking for Assyrian thumbrings in the literature and, you know, excavation reports. There weren't any because the Syrians never used them.
Right.
they just didn't know they were there. The one thing that I didn't discover, because there's one area that uses thumbrings that's totally unrelated to the rest of the thumbring using world, which was 2nd to 5th century Nubia, where there are these big stone thumbrings that look like late Manchu thumbrings, and they were slightly tapered, and everybody said, yes, that's what they are, thumbrings. And that's what I thought at the time. About last year, I found an article published a few years ago by archaeologists working on this Nubian stuff, and one of the guys pointed out that they're definitely thumbrings, but they're worn in tombs when they're on somebody's thumb. Sometimes they're thin side down, and sometimes they're fat side down. And if it was a thumbring, they'd be always the same way because they would only work one way.
Yeah.
And he came to the conclusion that they're in fact just a ring.
Oh, right. Normal, just, you know, normal ring, yeah?
It's a ring you wear on your thumb. And Africa is a place full of really innovative ways of shooting bows. They have little things you kind of get the string under a little button there, and there's a little knife out there. You've got your kind of self-defense if the guy gets in. All this really, and there are some really strange release aids which kind of strap on and go over the spring, and you hold on a little tabby bit that are more like modern releases than anything in the ancient world. But having said that, it doesn't look as though there was a living tradition of thumbring using. There's a few people that are very convinced that it is, mainly from purely academic levels where they haven't tried to use these things.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's maybe they'll find an engraving on the side of a tomb showing someone using a thumbring, but they haven't so far. So and you know, like it's like someone said, oh well, the ancient Egyptians used a thumb drawer. Look at the pictures of them on the wall.
Right.
And they pointed out that in all those pictures on the walls, the thumb is perfectly straight and the fingers are like that. We know it's stylized. It's not a photograph. It's an artist who has to show all of the pharaoh's fingers because if there were magical reasons for it, you had to be able to see everything. That's why people's feet in the same direction and everything.
Okay, right.
But my argument was this: when they found Tutankhamun, we've got his underpants. If he had a thumb ring, we would have his thumb rings too. So you know, it's just an opinion.
What is? Tell me, what is? I'm interested. You know, in Aboriginals in Australia, did they have a history of archery or using bow and arrow? No. Okay.
In Australia, the Aborigines had developed spear throwers. Which one? And they didn't have large-scale warfare. So without the kind of driver, the people in New Guinea used bows and arrows, had quite large-scale warfare because they were agriculturalists going back 8,000 years. I think they've just recently found, you know, evidence of such early agriculture. And people would trade, like in North Queensland, Aboriginal people would go up to trade for things that they couldn't get. And they'd often bring back bows and arrows for their kids, for toys.
I see. Right.
I saw a old film from, I think it was the 1930s in Central Australia, where they were showing an Aboriginal man who had just came out of the desert recently with his family. And they asked him to demonstrate spear throwing. And he hit a moving kangaroo with a spear from about 30 yards.
Oh, crazy. That is unbelievable.
Most people couldn't do that with a bow.
Wow, that is awesome.
So, I mean, these people underestimate how sophisticated Aboriginal culture was.
Definitely.
But it just didn't go in that particular direction.
Yeah.
They didn't really have the need
for defense or attack.
Yeah. In South America, there were tribes that had both spear throwers and bows and arrows at the same time in the same group. And they bows and arrows for hunting and spear throwers for fighting, because it was part of their culture that it was more fair to fight with spear throwers.
All right. Yeah.
And it was more effective to shoot monkeys out of trees with bows and arrows.
Yeah.
So, you know, people say, oh, that they're primitive. They're not necessarily primitive. They've just made different choices.
Yeah.
Which are probably appropriate for where they are.
Okay, no, that's interesting, because I was kind of under the assumption that many aboriginal communities around the world, like you say, you know, you've got, you know, tribes in sub-Saharan Africa, you've got tribes in South America, you've got even like Inuit people in, you know, North and South Alaska.
I've seen quite a few old Inuit bows, and Inuit people made really complex bows.
Really?
Technically and actual in the technique as well, so that they were really well thought out. And I had a friend who'd set up a museum, and he had a lot of Inuit archery equipment, including harpoon arrows for hunting seals.
Wow. Oh, amazing. Gosh.
And he'd, in order that he could repair things, he'd found an Inuit family who made him, I think it was 40 feet of braided sinew cord for repairing the bows and that.
Right.
So the museum's got this little roller cord now in case anything breaks. And I mean, technically, like, if you think about a harpoon arrow that's wrapped in sinew, how do you stop it falling apart?
Yeah.
And the answer was seal fat, a wonderful waterproofing material.
Right, yes.
But I would, you know, like, I'd visit this person every now and then, and we'd go down to the museum to catalogue things, because there was a book published about it, and we went through all of the stuff and tried to identify more precisely what it was. Absolutely beautiful bows and arrows from Turkey, a few from Iran, which is really quite rare outside of Iran to have Persian bows. Afghanistan, a magnificent red and gold painted bow from Afghanistan. Mughal bows, what we call crab bows. Actually, I've got some bows off camera to show you.
Sure.
And all really interesting stuff. So you know, this was I was working in IT at the time, and I was buying thumb rings, because there weren't that many people selling thumb rings, and this person knew a lot about thumb rings. And so I eventually went over to have a look where most of the thumb rings had ended up. Not the ones that he was selling were things that weren't going to go into his collection. And it was just fascinating, because there was the whole range of the different technical designs of thumb rings to work different ways. And at the time, both my thumbs were the same size.
Yeah.
After 40 years of shooting, this one is slightly bigger, like about a millimeter bigger.
Right.
In diameter.
Yeah.
But I can still fit thumb rings on that, like original thumb rings. So this is a walrus ivory. I have to learn how to do this.
Wow.
This is a walrus ivory
thumb
ring from Iran.
Beautiful.
And what does he? Does he have a? He doesn't have a date on it. Now this.
That's got to be very strong.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But it's a perfect fit. If it wasn't ivory, I would have tried shooting this one. I made a copy of it and shot that, so this is good.
Amazing.
And this is Turkish or Persian. That's red jasper.
Red jasper is what is that? A stone or something?
It's a stone like an agate, so it's a very hard stone.
Right.
This one actually, this is one of the ones that did fit me, but doesn't fit me anymore because I've been shooting for so long. I mean, I didn't develop calluses or anything on my thumb, but it just gets stronger and the tendons get slightly bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on the other hand, this is again either Persian or Northern Indian. This is jade.
Jade. Oh, beautiful. Right. Beautiful. Yeah.
This one actually fits me perfectly.
Yeah.
And I have shot with this one. Of course, jade is really tough.
Yeah, and we can see they're slightly different in overall style or shape from the Persian one and the Turkish, and it's very interesting to see kind of the development.
I think you can see the difference in shape between these two.
One is a bit the jade one is a bit bigger, a bit kind of wider profile, deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, deeper. When you look at them, because I mean, you know, you can see the lips are slightly different in shape too.
Yes.
You notice neither one of them is pointed on the lip, which is what a lot of modern are made like, because it's rather unfortunate. It causes it makes it difficult to hold to grip the string properly if you've got a pointed tip.
Yeah.
This one is white jade.
Right.
Again, see how the lip is quite rounded?
Yes.
You can feel inside that it's actually thickest in that middle part there. So it tapers down to that edge and it tapers up to that edge. And that gives you something solid to grip onto so it doesn't move around.
Right.
And that characteristic shape really looks nice on these rings. It really.
Yeah.
Those rings are all probably 18th century, maybe a bit earlier, but it's hard to tell, because what I was going to say is there's not a Persian style or a Turkish style or a Mughal style.
Yeah.
There are different shape rings for different types of shooters, and it's like saddles. The saddles would be. There was a book written about Mongolian saddles in the 80s by a Australian saddler that went to Mongolia and measured up saddles and everything and looked at how they were used. And he said there doesn't seem to be any consistency. You'll have one saddle used in this area and you'll find exactly the same saddle in another area, but the majority of saddles in that area will be an entirely different type.
Right.
And I found that too when I went looking at rings. Like the only ring that's really distinctive to a culture is this one with the little hook on the side.
Wow, I've never seen that before.
This is a jade ring. It's about 400 BC. And it's from China.
Right.
And this is the warring state shape of ring, and you can see it's really complex.
Yeah, like there's a lot of angles on there, and
and it's got a tiny little hole in the back there for a little thread to go through. And I've put a silk thread through there. It's a continuous hole, and that was, you could loop it through a loop and hang it on your belt or something as a decoration.
Got you. So what? But what's that hook for?
Well, this is the $1 million question. My guess, I made a copy of this. I actually had a friend who was a dentist, and she made me a silver copy of it,
Right.
which used to fit me because this is a long time ago. And I came to the conclusion was that it stopped you from turning your hand too far around that way.
Right.
Because the arrow, it touched the arrow shaft. You could feel it touch the arrow shaft. And if you turn your hand too far around that way, string hooks on your thumb. So when you release, it's a dragging release, and you don't get a really good release.
I see.
So you actually want your thumb to be basically at right angles to the string. So the arrow is at right angles to your thumb as well.
Okay.
And that's the smallest distance it can travel when you release. So it's the least disruptive.
Interesting.
And I've got, these are bronze rings. These are probably, well, this one says it comes from Iran. It actually says it comes from Luristan, which I find very hard to believe. These are probably 15th, 16th century. You notice how it's got a little bump in it there?
Yes, yeah.
That was a fashion for a while in these rings, but it didn't last because it puts pressure on the wrong part of the thumb. And if you start to use heavy bows, it doesn't work. It's quite uncomfortable. This one.
So all of these rings, are these historically, like historical rings, i.e. You found them and they are from that period, or some of them you made replicas of?
These I purchased through people, but I've got provenances for them, so I know where that person purchased them from.
Right.
And I mean, like in one case, I missed out on getting a ring. There was this lovely lady in Sydney, in Australia, who collected silver, and she, despite being an Australian, she was an expert Turkish speaker and used to teach Turkish in Turkey. And while she was there, she picked up a beautiful Seljuk silver ring, and it had that slightly concave profile.
Yeah.
And many years later, she decided to sell it, and I didn't get a chance to bid on it. And God, it was beautiful. It had all that foliate decoration on the lip. It was just a wonderful piece of gear.
Yeah.
She had a really good eye. You didn't have to know about thumb rings if you really knew what you were looking at. Here's a type that we're not really sure. It's got a very vertical lip, and it's very short. This one's quite big, and I have a feeling that I can't prove it, that maybe this was not used by itself, but maybe it had a fold of leather in there, and this was actually to keep the leather in place, not to be a ring by itself. But I don't know, because there's no literature on these rings or how they were used.
I was talking to Justin Martin about the Manchu, the Chinese thumb rings, and they're very kind of circular and round. And I was asking, how does that actually stay on the thumb? Because, you know, with the Turkish and the Persian ones, they're more like an egg shape, so they can fit around the joint.
Well, I've got one here, and I'll show you. Always got a Manchu ring handy.
Okay.
But basically, what you do is you take your hand, you put the ring on your thumb,
right,
so that the knuckle of your thumb is in the middle of the ring.
Okay.
Then you bend your thumb inside the ring, and then you can't pull it off. Right.
Okay.
Your thumb, it comes straight off. So the technique for shooting these rings is different from a standard ring. Peter Decker in Holland interviewed a lady who was living in Singapore at the time, whose father had been taught Manchu archery, and he had taught her. And she was a champion archer in the 1930s or something.
Yeah.
And I had said to him about this method, which I'd worked out from looking at old paintings and old photographs.
Yeah.
Of people actually shooting, as opposed to people standing around, because that doesn't really help.
Yeah.
No, they all had them here.
Right.
Not down here. This is how they normally used to show them. And that doesn't work because there are tendons at the base of your thumb there. And if the string is sitting there, it really hurts.
Yeah.
But this lady explained that there were 3 techniques. The first one was for light bows, where you just held your index finger without touching the thumb, and the index finger just held the arrow against the side of the bow, as you imagine.
Yeah.
For medium strength bows, you just touch the index finger onto the tip of the thumb. And for really heavy bows, it actually went over the thumb. And all the time, the ring is pressed against the side of the middle finger, just like a Turkish or a Persian ring would be.
Right. So the string is caught in behind the ring all the time. Yeah. Right.
And when you release, like if this was a Persian ring, you would release like that.
Right.
But with these rings, you release like that.
Oh, down.
Because, yeah, you turn that way. And when you do that, your arm, you can't see here, but your arm goes straight out.
Yes. Right.
And I had rings like this for many years before I worked out how to use them. And I was really impressed when Peter actually found somebody who had been. The other thing on Manchu archery that I discovered, purely because a Mongolian friend at a symposium in Korea had brought along a DVD with some old film. It was on archery in Mongolian, but there was some old film from the 50s and whatnot of archers shooting.
Yeah.
And I mean, looking at your arrows in the background, short fletching, right?
Yes, they're just like short, kind of 3-4 inch ones. Yeah.
3 inches, I would say.
Yeah, 3 inch ones.
Yeah. And what Manchu arrows, they had 11-inch fletching.
Wow.
And you've got to think, you've got your bow.
Crazy.
And you put your arrow on it, and that much of the fletching is in front of the bow.
Correct.
So when you pull it, it's going to get all bent out of shape.
Yeah, mangled up.
In this old Mongolian films, the guys would come out, they'd hold their bow horizontally. They would turn their hand down like that so the arrow wasn't touching the bow, pull the bow, and then just drop the arrow onto their thumb.
Wow, interesting.
And to see this done, and of course, the first thing I did was when I got home, I tried it out, and it works.
Really?
And it explained, there's a beautiful photograph of a Manchu archer at full draw from the 1890s. And it was from a stereo pair, and it's so precise that you can see everything. You can see where everything is. But what worried me was that the arrow was that far above his hand.
Okay.
On the bow hand end. And of course, he was just clipping it into place.
Right.
And or alternately, he's standing for such a long time at full draw that he's lifted it because that was one of the things you could do.
Yeah.
And who would have known this?
So they're drawing the string first, and then they're putting the arrow on.
Oh no! Let me show you. I'll just string a bow up. And I'll show you.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a very lightweight bow I use for demonstrations.
Yes, please.
Using yours. And I don't know if I've got an arrow with a feather long enough. I mean, I've got actual Manchu arrows here, but they're put away.
Yeah.
Because you don't really want them out where the bugs live.
No, they'll get eaten up.
No. I'll try and see if I can get this into position. Okay. I think, I've got arrows long enough. That's good. Actually, arrows with big feathers. That's even better. Okay. Now I'm going to try and see, see what I'm doing. Here's the bow. Here's the arrow. Put the arrow on the bow.
Right.
Now imagine this feather is going all the way up to there. So you turn the bow around like this. And you drop the arrow down like that, and then draw it back.
Got you. Okay, right.
So it's it's a
interesting.
It's a really interesting technique. Many years ago.
And you saw that on video, right? You said.
Yeah. Well, it was an old film.
Wow.
It was like you see all this debate about why do the Mongols shoot on the left-hand side of the bow now? And I was at one of these conferences, and I was talking to a Mongolian professor, and I said, all of the old films show them on the right-hand side of the bow. It's only in modern times you see it on the left-hand side of the bow. And he said, yeah, it was about 1964. And they decided that they were getting greater accuracy by moving it. But the thing is that what they did, which probably has more effect on their accuracy than anything else, is that if you're going to shoot with the arrow on that side of the bow, then you've got a problem. Because if you do a normal thumb draw, you push the arrow. It's going to come off.
Yeah, that's right.
So what they did was they went down to there, so they weren't touching the arrow anymore.
I see.
But the side effect of that is there's less effect on the arrow from your hand. And if you do the same thing on the other side of the bow,
right,
and actually knock down there without touching the arrow, you get the same effect. It's really that they've removed interference from the drawing hand on the arrow. But
that surely that will affect the kind of consistency of the shot and overall kind of accuracy if you're not actually in contact with the arrow, and plus if you're coming a little bit lower on the string, it's gonna maybe cause a bit of up and down.
Well, this is an interesting point, and I haven't seen any serious studies on this. That having the point where you're drawing the string out of line with both the arrow and where your grip is on the bow is really quite interesting, but no one's done any serious study in it. If you look at modern Western bows with shelves and rests, the arrow is sitting that far above your hand. So the point of pressure on the bow is already 2 inches out of alignment with the arrow. With that system, all of your pressure is below the arrow. So when you release, what's going to happen is the string without an arrow on it, which is slightly behind the nock, is going to move forward faster than the string with the arrow because it's pushing the arrow as well. So that's going to correct itself straight away. Now, whether it gives an upward push on the arrow or not, it's hard to say. But on some slow motion videos I've done of shooting with the normal draw, I can't see any vertical movement. There's quite a bit of horizontal movement, but there doesn't appear to be vertical movement. But you'd need a much faster camera to really pick it up, and you'd need to shoot a whole heap with it just below this thing, just below the arrow nock. But it's important to remember that when you're shooting normally with a normal draw, and I can demonstrate this again, I hope. So you've got your normal draw, and you're like this, and you're holding the arrow in place with the
index finger,
midpoint of what's called the proximal phalanx of the index finger. But when you get ready to release, when you're at full draw, right, all the way back here, you actually turn your hand a little so that that finger's not touching the nock anymore. Like for instance, when you're doing flight archery with like Turkish style flight arrows, and you're using a sipper, you can't afford to put any sideways pressure on the arrow, because the point of the arrow is behind your hand, is behind your bow.
That's
and if you put any pressure on it, it goes out of the sipper. So you've got to have absolutely no pressure on the arrow just before you release.
Right.
And this is it's not obvious if you watch somebody doing it that that's what they've done. If they do it right, that's what happens. If you're shooting heavy arrows as opposed to very light arrows, and you're shooting at close range, it doesn't actually matter whether you've still got pressure on the arrow, because you generally have bigger fletching to straighten the arrow out fast. It's the difference between hunting arrows and war arrows. Hunting arrows are designed to be used from 10 to 20 meters. War arrows are designed to be used from 50 to 200 meters. So they've got to be able to fly well.
Interesting. Yeah. I wanted to go over some of the video links that you sent me, so people can see them. But just before we do that, it was just kind of just an observation. Back to talking about Aboriginal communities and how, although they are so spread out around the world, that they all feature an element of bow and arrow or archery. In your view, where do you think this came about? Was it just, necessity is the mother of invention, and they just came to it from thinking about how to more efficiently hunt and defend themselves,
well, arrowheads as objects like stone arrowheads have been dated back a really long way. There was some small pieces, and how do you tell an arrowhead from a spearhead, right? Arrowheads are really small.
Yes.
If you have a something that's that wide, it's an arrowhead.
Right.
If it's that long and that wide, it's an arrowhead, because anything you could fit it onto would be too small to use for a spear.
Yes.
There's a kind of like a quantum step from arrowhead to javelin head, or atlatl head.
Atlatl, yeah.
And which I mispronounced incidentally. The tl sound is very difficult for people who don't speak Nahuatl.
Yeah.
No,
well, it's not easy to pronounce anyway, so I'm sure you will get it wrong.
Oh no. But my guess is that bows and arrows are really ancient with modern humans, and it's possible it was developed several times, but I don't really think so. It's so basic that once somebody developed it, other people would copy it, and it would just move out. You'd have it everywhere. The exception being Australian Aborigines, whether every time they do archaeological examinations, they're finding older and older settlements. So the earliest well-dated ones are 65,000 years ago.
Oh.
So these people had walked or their ancestors had walked from Africa around like Arabia, down one side of India, and somehow, or possibly they'd got up the other side of India, down Southeast Asia, into the islands around Indonesia and then down to Australia when it was easy to get across, when the seas weren't as deep. They've come a long way.
Wow.
And this is one of the reasons they've been here so long. They work out lots of things to do that work perfectly well for them, until we came along and screwed it all up. But the thing about spear throwers definitely preceded bows and arrows. In North America, for instance, there's evidence of spear throwers going back almost to when people turned up, but bows and arrows only turn up about 800, the year 800.
Right.
And they gradually displaced spear throwers. Because you can carry more arrows than you can.
Yeah, well, it's more of an efficient tool, isn't it? I mean, you throw a spear and your spear's gone, but you can carry 10, 20, 30 arrows and keep shooting, can't you?
Generally speaking, in hunting, spear's almost as efficient. The advantage of bows and arrows is you can be crouched down and pop out and shoot, whereas with a spear thrower, you've got to do that.
Yeah.
And animals are pretty good at noticing things like that. But if you're primarily a hunter, you probably could get away with spear throwers, particularly if the game was of a medium to large size. And you can, like Australian Aborigines, from what I've seen, and I'm not an expert on this, but from what I've seen, carried maybe 3 or 4 spears with them. They didn't have just one spear and a spear thrower.
Right.
And so they were prepared. And this is probably the reason. Again, they didn't have a necessity to use bows and arrows, so they didn't. And it wasn't part of their culture because they got here so early that bows and arrows may not have been that common. They might have been around, but they might not have been that common. And the other thing is bow woods. You've got to have woods that match your skill.
Right, yes.
I mean, the Neolithic European bows, and if you want to talk to somebody about that, Jürgen Jonkman is the man for it in Germany. They had very complex shapes to make up for the fact of the types of wood they were using and how they manufactured them. So they would often have round backs because they cut them out of saplings. And sometimes they had thickened ends that were quite narrow to increase the leverage, like a composite bow, except made out of wood and straight-ish.
Interesting.
So the kind of technology was really quite advanced.
Excellent.
Even though, I mean, we don't think of it, but it was.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm just gonna share my screen. I'm gonna look at a couple of these. 1 second. These videos here. Okay, so this one is, you can see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So this was one video sent to mounting and adjusting a Persian or Turkish quiver on a belt. So maybe you can just, it's 12 minutes. We won't go through all of it, but maybe you can just talk through what was going on here. So this is your Persian quiver.
Well, this is more Turkish quiver, but yeah. And
that's a bow quiver. Yeah. Okay. Right. Excellent. And is this one made? So your friend made this, and you gave them the pattern, or?
Oh no! I this was somebody ordered it, and I made it for them.
Oh, amazing! Wow, beautiful.
And then we did this little video so they'd know how to adjust it.
Right.
So.
Wow, stunning! Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. There was a whole study I did on this. There's some beautiful Turkish quivers in Dresden, and the thing that's odd about them is the straps that they hang off the belt on are really wide.
Right.
But they're brocade, so I think the reason they're really wide is showing off.
Right.
But a lot of the quivers that are fairly plain, the straps are really narrow. And
it's just give me 1 second. Hold on. Let me just pause this. So presumably you had to learn, I mean, leather work and stuff, or
yeah.
That's not, you can't just make a quiver like that. I mean, that's a real work of art then.
Yeah, the thing was to learn the design. I mean, you need the technique. You need to be able to sew leather and shape something like that. But the really difficult part was to learn the design, to what the balance is and how they're supposed to sit.
Yes.
And these things, like the back of the quiver there.
Yeah, I can see how you've tied it, and you can adjust the
you can adjust
straps. Okay, right.
So that part of the quiver is not seen in paintings or anything. It's only because there are ones in museums that we know about this.
Amazing.
And the generally speaking, the quiver had its own belt. It was a thing.
Yeah.
You didn't hook your quiver onto your normal belt. In Chinese novels of the 14th century, they translate it as doing that, and I'm not quite sure whether they really meant that or not, because some of the Chinese quivers look just like this, not exactly that shape, but the two straps came together, and it is possible they really did hook them onto the belt. But the Manchu quivers were more like this.
Is there a difference between a ground archery quiver and a horse archery quiver, or can they be adjusted for both?
This type of quiver can be adjusted for both. There's not a lot of evidence. There's ancient Arabic evidence for the names of different types of quiver. But there's not a lot of evidence for what the general ground quiver was like. And you've got to think in places like Syria and Palestine, there are an awful lot of foot archers. really good ones, because
Yeah.
they were well known for it. And the if you read, like, there's the memoirs of Usama ibn Munkith from the 1100s, and he was an Arab aristocrat, professional soldier, kind of, in the sense that aristocrats were like knights in Europe, and that they weren't, like professional soldiers like we'd mean.
Yeah.
But they were still very experienced. And he never refers to using a bow on horseback.
Interesting.
Except when Turks do it. And I mean, that makes you wonder. A lot of the Arabic manuals have very little on horse archery, with the exception of Taibuchas. And that may be because he was a Mamluk and he was a Turk by ethnicity.
Yeah.
These work perfectly well. There's another type of quiver which I wrote an article about, called the closed quiver, where it's a long quiver that faces forward, and the arrows are put in knocked down. So you reach into the opening of the quiver and pull the arrows point first out.
Oh, interesting.
And that may have been more suited for use on foot.
Yeah.
But I really don't know. Without real evidence, it's very difficult. I mean, right up until the Assyrians and the Achaemenid Persians, foot archers had back quivers.
Right.
Big ones.
Right.
And some of the quivers described, there's a book translated into English as Arab Archery, which in its published form is said to be from 1500. But an Egyptian scholar by the name of Asraf has tracked down another copy of the manuscript in the Topkapi library. And it's dated, I think, in the 1270s, 1279 or something. So it's actually a much earlier. It's the same thing. It's a much earlier copy.
Yeah.
And it actually refers to quivers slung over the shoulder.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain they're talking about foot archers here. The description's a bit difficult, because if you follow the description, the quiver would be hanging on the wrong side.
Yes.
But it's quite clear what they mean, that you reach over your right shoulder and pull the arrow out.
Yeah.
So I think foot archers probably carried their arrows in bulk in a container. It might not necessarily have been a quiver for wearing. I mean, you might have worn it over your shoulder, but taken it off and put it on the ground and pull the arrows out when you were going to use it. But without, we'll eventually find out, because there are a lot of Furusiyya manuscripts that haven't been translated into English yet.
Yeah.
And to be honest, haven't been translated into modern Arabic either. Yeah. I mean, a person can read this. I mean, anyone that can read standard Arabic can read these manuals, but half the words in them are not in common.
Yeah, they won't mean anything, because they don't know the terminology.
And sometimes the words have changed meaning, which makes it even harder.
That's right. So yeah, in that previous video, you had you put on the bow quiver and the arrow quiver, which was amazing. So this one, these are all posted on the same site. I see Razma Afzar. Is this?
This is specifically for Persian martial arts.
Okay.
And the person that I've done all these translations with, Manashir Khorasani.
Yes.
I mean, he's the real. He's the hard-working one of the two, because he translates it,
right?
And then we go over it together,
right,
via the internet, to work out what these, what certain of the phrases really mean. If some of the stuff is so obscure, there's words that we haven't been able to find in any dictionary, and there's descriptions that just don't make any sense. But we know they made sense in the times when they were written.
Yeah.
But they don't make any sense now. ladle-shaped arrows. What is a ladle-shaped arrow? The word ladle must have had a secondary meaning, but we don't know what it is, so we can't define it.
But this Razma Afzar, this is something you set up in Australia?
No, this is set up by Dr. Horazani. It's worldwide.
Because the description here says Mr. Bede Dwyer, Ramza Afzar Research Team Australia. Unless you're the branch, are you like the Australian branch of it? Or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
When he set this up, he said, "Would you like to, be a member?"
Okay.
And I thought, well, it's a good place to publish this kind of stuff where people can see videos and that. The articles, like the translations that we do together, generally get published in journals, historical journals, and things like that. So it's a kind of the more serious research.
So this is showing 3 Persian draws. So let's see the levels of drawing the bow.
That's the actual level on your face.
Got you, right.
So there's drawing to the chest.
Right.
Drawing, the next one they call the mustache draw, which is above, along the upper lip. Yeah. And then the eyebrow draw, which is high up, which was practiced particularly in Isfahan.
Right.
But this is actually shooting flight arrows. We were out. This is the flight field in Bonneville Flats in Utah.
Yes, it looks like it. Yeah.
And this bow was made by the Taiwanese bowmaker Zhang Yuhua. And it was really fast.
Wow.
We had a long walk to find these arrows. And I mean, we're not even shooting at a high angle. They just
you're not. That's right. What type of bow shape is that?
It's not quite, but it's getting near what they called in Persian chahakhan, which means 4 curved bow. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Sind bows, but
Sind.
Yeah, Sind province. Well, there's a bow the English call Sind bows because they were still being used in Sind in the 19th century. And they have this very complex curvature, like a deeply reset handle area.
Yes.
And then quite sharp recurve at the tip. But they actually have one, I'm pointing to the picture like someone could tell. They have one extra curve where the ridge section joins the bending section.
Right.
They're beautifully made bows.
Beautiful.
And at the time they were first seen by the English in the 19th century, they were only being used for bird hunting, even though some of the bows were, upwards of 90-pound draw weight.
Right. Amazing shape, beautiful shape.
Oh yeah. It's a lovely bow.
Yeah.
There's a big distinction between shooting modern bows and horn and sinew composites. You can feel it in your hand. They just have a much smoother transition from full draw to release. I mean, it does depend on your grip and that. If you follow the old manuals and use one of the 3 major grips, then they're smooth to use. But if you try and hold them like a Western bow, they kind of kick around in your hand a bit sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to say. Every archer has a different experience because there can be very slight differences in the pressure.
Of course,
and that gives you a different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So this image here is a Persian archer or Turkish archer or what?
This is a Jawahrid image. So when the Mongol Ilkhanate in Iran collapsed in the 1300s, a Mongol tribal group called the Jalayir took over basically Iraq and Western Iran. And their sultans were really great patrons of the arts, particularly the book arts. And so you see a lot of paintings from that period of really high quality. And but sometimes very difficult to understand. You see the helmet is very finely defined.
Yes, definitely.
But that style of armor that he's wearing is very difficult to really explain. It's taken me years to track down anything that could, vaguely make this up. People come up with wonderfully exotic explanations, but factual stuff.
And it's interesting how the hand position is kind of kind of like this, where the knuckles are down in a way.
Well, what he's doing is this, which is to put the string at an angle on the thumb ring.
Yes.
So that when he releases, it's a sharper release.
Got you. Right.
They've exaggerated it because it's an artist doing a painting, not a photographer taking a photograph. It's like the same thing in the hand. It looks as though he's got what's called a square grip.
Yes.
Which is where the hand is turned that way.
Yes.
But that's just an artifact of painting because they just didn't concentrate on that kind of detail when they were painting.
Yeah.
So sometimes these things look much more precise than they really are.
Right. Right.
And you know, you face the great difficulty of shooting in a helmet with a male aventail of where you're going to put your hand. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see. Because I've been studying these paintings since my teenage years. One of the things that you've got to learn is how they painted them. Interesting.
So here, they're drawing to their eye. This guy here, he's drawing quite high up, right?
Yeah. And this is the upper.
And this guy here.
And they're shooting downwards. And it was said that it gave you an advantage shooting downwards, but all of the serious manuals say no, it doesn't really do that. It's blind. It puts the arrow going in the wrong direction to where you're looking. And they didn't use what we would call mechanical aiming. I mean, they used the point of the arrow as a gauge and everything like that, but it wasn't a mechanical aiming. Modern Western archery like this, you're trying to lock yourself in a given position.
Yes.
But say Persian, Turkish, Arabic archery, you're drawing to a point, you're drawing to a level, and you actually, all of the manuals say you draw until the point is here. Right, so you're not, you don't have half the arrow sticking out the front of the bow. And even on this, you can see that they don't show any part of the arrow in front of the bow.
No, it's literally resting on the bow.
They do. It's pretty, you know, it's random. It's not like there's a convention about it, but this. So you have three positions. You have how far your hand comes back, how high the arrow is on your face, and when the point reaches your thumb. Now, it could be the back of the point on the distal joint, which is the joint furthest away from the hand. It can sometimes be on the right at the tip of the thumb. So that means the arrow is not drawn as far. And in many cases, they say halfway along. So they basically mean the back of the point, not the front of the point.
Yeah.
And the advantage to that is the more of the points in front of the arrow, the more bendy the arrow becomes.
Right.
And therefore, more force is used bending the arrow. Any force that bends the arrow is taken away from pushing the arrow. And you can't get it back.
Right.
So if you can get your arrow to the right stiffness and draw it so that there's virtually no mass in front of the bow, or the support where it's supported on the bow, then you can get a faster, harder arrow coming out of the bow.
Interesting.
And I mean, if you're doing it on horseback, it's a bit scary.
Yeah, you pull a little bit too far, then you got a problem.
Yeah, but to be honest, one of the advantages of having ears on a bow, rigid tips, whether they're recurved or not, is that when you get to the point where the string is coming off at 90 degrees, the bow is in, you've got to put so much force to get past that point. In fact, from the point from about 70 to 90 degrees, you can feel it really clearly. You know you're at full draw. Yeah, right. And you're not going to, even if you're really hyped up with adrenaline and everything, you're not going to pull further than that. And this is not something that it's not obvious, because if you use a recurve bow, you can keep pulling them. They don't have a stop point like that, like a modern recurve.
Right.
But horn and sinew composites, or bows that are made to work like them, stop. And there's a really funny thing. I know you interviewed Adam Karpowitz, and I own 2 of his bows, and we correspond a bit.
Great.
Not so much since he's gone into full-time bow making, but
right.
Adam was telling me how about the bows that I'd bought off him, how they stack in the last 3 inches. And I said, but I can't feel that. And it took me a month to work out what was happening. I went out and shot the bows, and there is a point from here to here where your shoulders are so much better in
aligned.
Control,
right?
That it doesn't feel like it's heavy, even if it is. And he's right. He measured it, and I measured it too. I got a scale and a ruler and wound it all up to do this stuff.
Right.
And he's absolutely right. But the subjective feel is different.
Now, in this video, you are you're showing the different types of draw. Now, what is your? I see that you're practicing the khatra, right? The movement forward. What is your view on that? And
okay, first of all, the movement for what I'm doing is the bow hand is rotating downwards.
Yes.
There's only one source for the use of the term khatra, and that's Taibuka. He's got a little chapter on it, and it's in both the Arab and the Mamluk Turkish version, Kipchak version. And he says it's not just that rotation, but it's a punch forward.
Yes.
And that is very difficult to do. A lot of people are trying this and saying, oh, it makes the arrows go faster and everything. It doesn't. What happens is that it corrects another fault that you probably have. That fault is anticipating. If you get to full draw and push or punch forward, and you're supposed to actually, the shoulder movement is like you're jabbing somebody with your drawing arm elbow.
Yeah, backwards.
The forward movement, Taibuka's phrase is like the punch of an angry man. That is to say, not a thing like this, but like that.
Yeah, like a jab.
Yeah. That's it's being used now as a general term for follow through, which it's not. It's a specific type of follow through, and I think it would be better just to use follow through if you're going to do that. If you're going to have a blanket term for what you do with the bow hand as the arrow leaves or after the arrow leaves. Taibuka was very critical of people who did this after the arrow left. It should happen as the arrow leaves.
As the arrow leaves, yeah.
Yeah, and that's really hard. You can see what's happening with mine is that because these 3 fingers are tight, and I'm pushing with this part against the handle of the bow, there is a natural rotational motion. So as soon as you let go of the string and the string reaches there, it turns. And that just absorbs the energy in the bow. That's probably why I don't feel kick in the bow.
Right.
So it's very valuable because by getting rid of the feeling of kick, you don't flinch. You might notice when I'm shooting the short arrows, I do flinch quite often.
Is it similar to the modern day archers, the recurve archers, where their bow drops forward and they kind of drop their hand? Is it similar to that or not?
Well, first of all, they're not holding the bow firmly.
No.
And secondly, they've got a big weight on the front of the bow.
Stabilizers, yeah.
Yeah. So what theirs is the bow is free floating, and when they let go of the string, it naturally falls back to its balance point.
Right.
Whereas what happens with the kind of type of follow through I'm using, it's the muscles that are turning it. I was actually watching today a former Olympic archer was discussing what he called I don't know if this is in the picture, high wrist, and low wrist. So
Yes.
with two different positions of the hand.
Yeah.
Which when I learned archery was named exactly the opposite.
Ah.
And I have no idea what the real names for them are, but everybody knows what you're talking about. And he reckoned that the high wrist, you were using muscles in your arms, and it was inherently less stable. Whereas in Persian archery, the grip on the bow that's in all of the manuscripts mentioned, and seems to be the most common one for target archery. It's used in flight archery a lot too.
Yeah.
The hawk's claw grasp, or
yes, it's kind of like
Cobb the Chang Ali Bows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's with the whole of this part of the hand flat.
Right.
And the thumb down. So the arrow is actually resting here. It's not on the thumb at all.
Right.
And my experience is that's extremely accurate. Because you've got to be in a perfect position for it to work. You can't fudge it. But it's again, it's in Saracen Archery, which is the first English book that described it clearly. Maybe to some extent it's described in Mustafa Khani in Kopsteg and Heinz translation, but that was with a mushamma and a sipper, and that they change some of the things. Like when you shoot with a sipper, you can clench these two fingers.
Okay.
But when you shoot, if you do Chang Ali Bows without a sipper, definitely tense the index finger, and you certainly, with the thumb, you are holding it more tightly than you would normally. But the principal thing is these three fingers tight, these two loose.
Yes.
Because if you tighten your thumb, it's being cut by the feathers. And if you tighten your index finger, you risk the other three fingers getting loose. So you don't have a good grip on the bow. So it's an interesting. Some of the fun I've had. There's a video done by Monj Yosef, the Hungarian archer, at the flight shoot, where he's filming me. Yeah. And I shoot, and I had a faulty feather, which split lengthwise on the base, and the whole of the feather went into my thumb.
Oh gosh!
And I'm looking at this, thinking, how am I going to get it out? Because the barb's face backwards, right?
Yeah.
So I delicately pull it out and shake the blood off, and then shoot. Then continue shooting, because it only happens through something weird like that, or if you tense your thumb. So if you know that you've tensed your thumb and you relax it, even though you've got a cut there, the arrow, it might get blood on it, but it doesn't hurt or do any more damage. Which is the reason I had a friend who taught Japanese archery many years ago, and we were discussing bow hand gloves, because the Japanese have them. Yeah. Actually, they exist in Korean archery as well. And I said, well, what are they for? Because the Japanese never get feather cuts. And he said, if you've been shooting like 400 arrows or something and your skin is wearing out, so you can continue shooting without doing any. And I'm going, I haven't done that.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, that was. But yeah, somebody asked me the other day, how heavy did Japanese archers shoot bows in Kyudo? And it was pretty much, there was a kind of standard average, but he shot in Osaka, and he said that there was one man that came along and he was shooting over 90 pounds. Wow. And he was shooting the what they call heki style, where you start down then come up. Yes. As opposed to Ogasawara, when you start here and go up and come down. Yes, yeah. And so there was stuff going on that was outside the normal. This particular video.
Yeah, what's going on in this video?
You see there's a rope halfway down?
Yeah, I can see that. Are you trying to shoot at the rope or under it? Or?
Under. In Saracen archery, the description of the technique of shooting under the rope was used to calculate how many arrows you could shoot, the speed, by the translators. And they came to the conclusion that the only way that you could shoot under the rope at the distance that they had set and the height of the rope and all that kind of stuff was if your arrows were going at least 180 feet per second. Because it's a simple parabola, you can work out by knowing the landing point and the launch angle, essentially, which the launch angle is determined by the height of the rope. You can't have it. You can have it higher than that, but the arrow has to have fallen down. I'm doing this on the table in front of me. It's useless. The arrow has to have come down before it reaches the rope. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If it's coming down at too high an angle, it doesn't reach the target. So you've got to get this perfect thing. So my technique for this was an experiment to find out if you could do it. I mean, if I could do it, for that matter.
So how far is this rope and how high up is it?
It's roughly 8 feet high and it's about 37 yards away. So the target is 75 yards, which is it's a little rubber beaver. I know that sounds wrong, but
you hit the rope there. Okay.
Yeah. And I was trying to get as close to the rope as possible.
So is that what the goal of this exercise is, to get? I mean, shooting under the rope. I mean, I guess a lot of people can shoot under the ropes.
The purpose of shooting under the rope is to prove that your bow is shooting fast enough to be effective in combat. And this kind of game, it's noted in Arabic literature, but it was also done in England, and it was also done in China. So effectively, if your bow doesn't shoot an arrow fast enough, it will go over the rope if it hits the target. If your bow is shooting fast enough, it will go under the rope and still hit the target. Because I wasn't, but the people that were doing this for real would be aiming at the target. And somebody would be watching whether or not the arrow goes over the rope. And if it goes over the rope, it's too slow. And if it goes under the rope, it's going real fast and flat. And the flatter the trajectory, the faster the arrow, the less you've got to adjust your aim for different distances. Okay,
I see. All right. So the rope is there to measure how high the arrow is. The trajectory. Yeah. Okay, got you.
So what I did afterwards, because I did this a couple of years ago and just kept the video because we had to work something else out, I sat down with a chronograph and shot the same arrows with the same bow to find out how fast they were really going. And the whistling ones with the big whistling heads, they were going only at about 140 feet per second, which by the calculations meant they shouldn't have reached the target. And I think what happened, because they were laying next to the target, I think what happened was they slide on grass really well. And I think they were hitting early and sliding along.
Right.
Whereas the arrows that have the little hex steel blunts on them, I hit the target a couple of times with them and once knocked the target over and then the next arrow cut the arrow in half that was sticking in the target.
Oh, awesome.
So, no, it was not good. It was another lost arrow. I was doing some tests the other day. I did the same thing where one arrow cut two arrows in half.
Oh my God.
It's not. I didn't like that. That was expensive.
It's painful when that happens as well.
Well, I make all my arrows. I mean, this is my time I'm wasting here.
Yeah, that's right. So this bow you're shooting, it looks like a Korean,
Yeah, it's just Korean, a little 40-pound Korean bow.
Right.
It's not a horn and sinew bow. It's just a modern one. At the time, go on. I was going to say at the time I was doing this. This was one of the fastest shooting modern replica bows, and it was also cheap. Yeah,
these Korean Kaya bows. I mean, and like you say, they're quite affordable, and they are still quite loyal to the traditional shape of the Korean bow.
Oh yeah,
as well.
I've got 2 Korean horn bows.
Yeah.
One from the late 19th century and one that was made about 20 or 30 years ago. And like the dimensions in that are almost identical.
Yeah.
The difference is the horn bows, the tips are that far apart when they're unstrung, whereas these ones, they're opened out like an older bow.
Yes.
Because Korean archery's been continuous, I mean, when the Japanese occupied Korea in 1910, they tried to suppress Korean archery and introduce Japanese archery, which had some funny effects on Korean technique. But in the end, the Koreans didn't give up their archery. And it is still the longest distance target archery practiced, because the average range is about 140 meters.
Right.
I mean, this is in Syria, according to Taibucha, the long range shooting was done at I think it was 150 to 160 arm spans, which works out to be about 280 meters. And the Ottoman Turks also shot target at that distance, which is pretty scary. In one of the Persian manuscripts we translated, there's a type of Ottoman kind of flight arrow called a heki oku, which means dust arrow. You know the word kaki,
yeah,
which comes from Urdu word for dust, which is also a Persian word.
Right.
And the like dirt, the earth.
Right.
So in one of these Persian manuscripts, we came along and they're describing a target thing. And the target was at extreme distance, like, 300 yards or something.
Can't even see it at that distance.
What they did was they got a layer of fine dust and put it on top of the target. So when an arrow hit it, a little puff of dust would come up.
Wow. Right.
And this is where the name came from.
Interesting.
And I mean, nobody knew this. I think it is in the Turkish literature, but nothing that's been modernly, because I mean, modern Turkish doesn't use the old alphabet, and the old alphabet was really peculiar. I mean, it's Arabic alphabet, but the way it was used, because Turkish had a lot more vowels than Arabic. Yeah. And it was very important to know whether it was a front vowel or a back vowel. So the way, when Turkish was first being written down in an Arabic script back in the 9th century, the way that they did it is they used the kaf for a K in front of a back vowel, and they used the more normal K. They used that for in front of a front vowel. So if it was KE, you'd have one K, and if it was KA, you'd have a different K. And so there was this kind of little, because they didn't need those letters in Turkish, there was this little play where they adjusted the letters to get the to indicate what vowel was in there, and or what class of vowels. It wasn't a particular vowel. And this makes it very difficult to read Ottoman Turkish unless you've been trained in it. You can't. An Arabic speaker can read the letters but can't get the pronunciation. A Turkish speaker, if it was read out aloud to him, would be able to understand it. But he unless he learnt the Ottoman style of writing, he couldn't read it.
Yeah.
Even if he'd learnt Arabic, he still couldn't read it. The other thing is that Ottoman Turkish had a lot more Persian and Arabic words than modern Turkish does, because when the Republic was founded, they tried to make Turkish Turkish.
Yes.
Which, not a bad thing. Turkish is a good language.
Yeah.
And but it does mean that old literature is sometimes difficult. See, if you can read classical Arabic, you can read something that was written in 1000.
Yeah.
You mightn't understand all the words, but you can understand the grammar in that. It's pretty, I mean, it might have some extra word endings or whatever. If you can read Farsi and you pick up Shah Namah, you can read the Shah Namah, and it was written you know, like almost 1,000 years ago. So if you read English and you pick up Chaucer, which was only written 700 years ago, you're going to have real trouble.
Yeah, it's like a different language.
Well, it's the vowels have changed, which doesn't always happen, and that makes it really difficult. Plus, the fact is that the spelling was really random back in the good old days. Yeah. Printing, you know, when printing came in, that's when we started to get regular spelling.
That's right. In this video, what you? I think this is the bow you showed us now, right? That you're using.
Yeah.
What bow is this?
This is a Elong Archery crab bow.
Crab
bow.
So
it's got the proportions of a crab bow, and I can show you a real one. But it's made of molded plastic, and they make them very lightweight for children. But I found that if you want to make sure everything is in the right place and still shoot an arrow to see if it's coming off smoothly, these are very good training bows.
Right. Okay.
I think they come in 18 pounds and 30 pounds. I'm not quite sure about that. It might be 25. They're very cheap. Okay. They pull apart at the handle, so you can use them, take them around like a takedown bow.
Oh, they pull apart the handle. Okay.
Oh yeah, there's a joint at the handle.
Right.
And that just pulls apart. Obviously not while you're shooting.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to a Mongolian guy, and he bought a whole heap of them for horse archery in Mongolia, because they're, you know, basically indestructible. But apparently, you can actually. I think people were overdrawing them extremely, and they did pull apart at the handle. But I don't know, because we didn't get into the discussion of what really happened. But it was pretty. I'll show you a real one.
Yeah.
Because that's quite an interesting thing itself. I'll show you two, actually, because I've got two from the same bow maker.
Yeah.
But in different states of usage. And a lot of people think these are two different styles of bow, but they're the same style of bow, just in different conditions. So I don't know. Wow. So
awesome.
These are from India,
Uh-huh.
Northern India specifically. So this is a bow after it's been shot for a while, and it's opened out. It's much easier to string. But when you're finished and you're going to put it away for a while, that's what it looks like.
Wow. How do you string that?
That's a bit complicated. I know someone who can string this sitting cross-legged on the floor by themselves.
Oh my God. You probably need, do you need some strings or some rope with it or something to pull it round? Or?
You can. There's a thing that the Turks call a kemend, which in Turkish means a lasso, which goes around your waist and hooks into the limbs, and you push the handle away with your feet.
Yeah.
And when it's bent far enough, you can put the string on. There's a Turkish guy in Ireland that did a really good video on doing this.
Gokman, yeah, his name.
Yeah. And I'd made one of these because I'd found a detailed drawing of one, and I couldn't use it. He put a video up, and I saw him do it, and I said, that's how it works. And recently I made another one with a little adjustable buckle in it, so you could use it with different length bows, because they're really make it for one length bow. But these bows are really interesting. They're actually quite nicely decorated, and this one looks as though it's older, but it's not. It's just that one's in better condition.
So these, I mean, you couldn't. These are too old to shoot, right? You can't string these up.
Oh yeah, these are 18th century.
They'll break. Yeah. Wow.
They could be 19th century. It's hard to tell.
How did you come across those bows?
I bought them off somebody.
Okay.
Amazing what you can get for money.
Money does a lot of things, yeah.
But these are not that uncommon, because thousands and thousands were made, and they're pretty well made. And the princely states in British India often had large arsenals. And these things come on the market when somebody sells up all the stuff to, use real estate or something. But they're quite interesting because I've seen a couple cut apart.
Yeah.
Because you can't see the horn because it's completely covered. These have 2 strips of horn, meeting in the middle, going up to there.
Okay.
There is no horn past there.
Right.
And this really thick triangular section has a very, like a 1/4-inch wooden core, and all of this ridge and curve and everything is sinew. And nobody knows why they build them like that. Does
that not create a weak point where they join or not?
No, well, see, the join between this piece of wood and this piece of wood is there, so it's covered by the horn.
Okay.
You find that almost all of this type of bow, the major curve position, if the splice was here, the horn would come over the splice. If the splice is down there, the horn stops there. The horn is not even as wide as this bow. It will be about half the width of the bow down the center. And they still work really well. I was talking once to Edward McEwen in London, who was a bow maker, and he translated one of the Persian, an 11th, 12th century.
Is he still around? Is he still alive or?
Well, the last time I heard, which was about 6 months ago, he was alive, but he wasn't well. He's quite an elderly man now.
Right, okay.
And things can go wrong, but
yeah,
he was really helpful to me. Whenever I was in trouble trying to work something out, I'd try and work out what the time in London was and ring him up. This is pre-internet.
Yeah, sure.
And spend all my spare money on phone calls to because he just knew so much stuff. I mean, he was incredible.
Yeah, he's someone I'd like to try and track down, but I mean, if he's
no, I don't think he's well enough.
He's probably not well enough to talk right now and stuff.
No. He made quivers as well as bows. And the last big job I know that he was working on was he was making a bow for a Chinese-style hand honesty crossbow, a composite bow for one, not one of the layered bamboo ones.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about Korean crossbow bows are like this. They're very highly recurved. They're not quite as big. Well, about this.
Yeah.
They don't have the angles. They don't actually have ears. They just have little knobs that come out.
Yeah.
But he said he'd seen several, and I said when I was in Korea, I was shown a Korean military museum, archery type museum, and there was one of those bows in it, and there were actually 4 or 5, but there was one that was falling apart, and you could see how it was put together. So I described to him how it was put together, because it didn't have any horn in it.
Wow, interesting.
It was a layer of probably fruit wood on the belly.
Yeah.
Then a bamboo core. It had sinew on the back, but that was all spirally wrapped with sinew all the way along. So the whole thing was in compression. And the Koreans were really good at making bows that were very economical to make, but still performed. So there's in the Grayson Museum in Missouri, there are 2 black lacquered bamboo and sinew Korean bows that look just like ordinary Korean bows, but they have a belly of horn. They're completely wrapped in sinew and then lacquered black. And there's a couple of Korean war bows which are much bigger than the target bows that we see. And the horn didn't go all the way up.
Right.
And Jürgen in Germany made a bow like this. In Korean, they're called half horn bows because the horn only goes halfway up the limbs. And it was beautiful to shoot. I mean, and it's very economical horn. Because when you think about it, I mean, these look very different. But when you think about it, if you kind of roll them out, they're exactly the same. And I've measured them, they're like within a few millimeters of each other. So by not using as much horn may have been the rarer of the material, or horn of degree of straightness. in Iran, they would use strips of horn, so they would to even it out instead of just having like one horn piece. They would have 4 or 6 strips, and what they could do with that was they could make the limbs wider, and they could take advantage of a method that meant that the bows, when they were unstrung, would go further back into their reflex than, say, a bow that had a thicker limb.
Yeah.
Adam Karpowitz, in his book on Ottoman archery, has a section where he discusses the design features of these Persian bows. And it's quite clear that there wasn't an accident. In Manichew's book on I think Persian weapons, I've got it up here. There's some photographs of Persian bows. Now these are bows in museums in Iran, which I'll show you the book. I don't think it'll be useful for showing the actual picture. Oh God, it's a big book. I mean, it's a seriously heavy book.
Careful.
It's called Arms and Armour from Iran, the Bronze Age to the End of the Qajar period. I think it's still available, but it's massive.
Wow.
And it's got thousands of photographs in it.
Wow.
And some in colour, some in black and white. Lots of really early swords. If you're interested in early swords, it's got some great.
I'm gonna grab a similar, maybe not the same book as yours, but a book that I'm sure you might have come across. Just want to see if you've seen that one. Hold on.
I'm just trying to find a bow. While you're doing that, I'll happily.
Okay, so I'm sure. Well, this one I've got is by Robert Elgood. I don't know if it's that one.
Oh yeah, I've got it sitting next to me.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, fine. And then,
but have a look at the reflex on that one.
Oh my God! I mean, how on earth are you meant to use that?
It's an art.
Go say that again.
Zhang Yuhua taught me how to string them by myself, but this one, that's early Qajar. Qajar. He's got several in here. Oh, this might be the one. This is about 1508. This is just bits and pieces, close-ups of parts of the bow.
Oh, very, very good pictures there as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, sorry, I've got glare on this, but
sorry.
No, that's good.
There we go. Okay, that's like the cross sections.
So you can see up on the top, like there. I'm going to say left or right because it's all backwards to me. There's the full bow, and then there's close-ups of the decoration on the various sections of the bow. But that's fully signed and dated.
Amazing.
So, because bowyers were important people, and the inscriptions are shown, and I'm trying to see what the inscription said. One side bears the inscription "Uazmahi tun fi bahur saniye 914" because I can't remember the numbers. In the warm month of Leo, Asad, the year 914 Hijra, and the other side reads, Gaza Baba Muhammad Haj Hussaini Zeb Kar Va Zakhm The first part of the inscription translated as ordered for Muhammad Hajj Hussein, and the second part means he strung the bow with great force. And there's various other things of a respectful religious nature. But
amazing.
We don't get to find out about some of these things because they're in museums that aren't popularized.
Yeah, that's right.
Or don't necessarily.
Arms and armor from Iran. Right. Wow. Yeah, it looks like a manual of some kind, you know, like a really big.
Well, it covers, like, if you look at the edge, you can see it's half photographs and half text.
Wow, amazing.
I mean, I worked on this on the archery sections because we did a really good thing on archery in this. But it's got stuff on shields and how the straps work. And, and I mean, I've got a couple of shields. I'm trying to find the other one.
Have you come across this book, Bede?
Yeah, that's Catullus.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the one I was telling was the really good translation with all of the references and everything.
Yeah, so it has this is like the old Ottoman Turkish in the back, right?
No, it's pre-Ottoman.
That's pre-Ottoman. So what is that then?
This is Mamluk Kipchak from Egypt, Syria, the Mamluk Sultanate.
Okay, because it kind of looks a little bit Arabic, but it's not. But an Arab reader wouldn't be able to decipher it.
No. This is an Ottoman reader could read. They could pronounce it, but they mightn't understand all the words because Kipchak Turkish is a different branch of the Turkish language group to Ottoman Turkish.
Right. Okay.
But that if you read the section in the front where he discusses the meanings of different words and that's a really thorough. That's why I have a very high respect for him. His other book, the Manyatu, I think it's called, is on Furuziya in general, but it has things on archery like some of the trick shooting that they did when it's not an exam, but it was like that. Yeah, you were showing off to the Sultan how good you were. Sure. But there were the things that swords on horseback as well, where you had arrows in the ground and you had to ride along and cut the arrows off.
Oh my God.
Like leaning right down from your horse and because the arrows long in the ground. Skillful, very
amazing skill. Bede, I'm cautious of the time we've kept you going for quite some time now. It's probably I've lost track. An hour and a bit at least easily. If you're happy to, I think we're gonna do a part 1 and a part 2 possibly, because we haven't even talked about some of the other stuff, the manuscripts, arrow making, and things like that. And I did say that we'd try and do a few topics in the beginning, and we branched off as we kind of as we talked.
Pretty easy to do.
It is, yeah, but it's been absolutely mind blowing for me at least, and we've only scratched the surface, I think, with some of the books that you have and the equipment that you've made and things like that. So,
incidentally, speaking of sin bows, the Elgood book has McEwen's article on the sin bow in it. Which is a very important article on that particular type of bow.
Yeah.
It's called the Chahakam bow, the four-curved bow.
Right.
And they're extremely beautiful bows. I've only ever handled, I think, 3 of them in museum. And they're so beautifully made.
Yeah.
And most of the surviving ones are from Sindh province, but the Persian manuscripts mention it as one of the major types of bow used in Iran as well. So the problem is Iran was a kind of stretchy place.
Yeah.
Sometimes it went almost as far as Kandahar, and other times it was quite small.
So I think this was just find the chapter here. This is the one, yeah?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's really well done, that.
Excellent. I'll have a look through there and see.
And he was a bow maker, so he when he's talking about bows, he's not talking at second hand or third hand.
These are some of the bows.
Yeah. They're lovely.
Yeah, amazing. You also sent me some PDFs and some articles on things that you did, which had some great images and diagrams in there, which I would like to go through next time, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So for this part one, I appreciate your time and giving us your time, partaking your enormous vast knowledge that you have of all these different civilizations and histories and manuscripts and translations. So I think if we wrap this one up now and we do a part two and we talk about the arrow making, we haven't even talked about the flight archery properly, some of the manuscripts and things that you've worked on. I think that would be also very, very interesting if possible.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent.
No, this. Well, you'll find this, and this isn't part of the video, but you'll find that I'll just wander off in whatever direction you kind of are interested in. I'll just go there.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what we want. We want to try and absorb as much information as we can, but I'll try and keep it structured to some degree. But that way we can cover all the things we need. But for this particular episode, I appreciate you giving us your time. It's been amazing. I mean, there's so much information. I'm going to have to go over this again and really absorb all the stuff that we talked about.
But it's important to kind of, there's stuff I know for sure, stuff I think from all the evidence I've seen, and stuff of just speculation because nobody knows.
Of course. So
I'm not, like when I say this or that, it depends on the particular thing and how I express it, whether I mean that I'm pretty certain. Like I'm not certain at all about the Nubian thumbrings.
Right. No, but I mean that's fine. I mean that you've stated that, and no one's going to hold you to account for it. But at least
it's the internet. People see things in what you say that you never even thought of.
No, that's true. That's true. Unfortunately, people will see whatever they want to see and hear what they want to hear. Unfortunately, but at least this way we've got a good full interview of that, and if people are really interested, they can see the full thing. But cool, excellent. All right, Bede, thank you very much. We're gonna stay in touch, and we'll figure out another appointment. Hopefully this week, depending on your time and availability.
Okay.
And we'll.
I don't think. I mean, I work to my own schedule. So if I'm like I still work a bit on computers and things like that, but mainly it's now research and making archery gear because I like doing it.
Excellent. No, that also, I'd like to know a little bit more about that as well. That'll be interesting. No, excellent. All right, Bede, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. It's evening over there with you, so a good night, I guess.
It's actually 40 minutes past midnight.
Oh, right. We took you over to the next day, so it's Tuesday with you. It's Monday with us.
Yes. Well, it's okay.
Excellent.
But no, it's good. It got me. I like people to find out what the real things are like.
That's it. That's what we want.
And like I've got a lot of composite bows, and I've got modern ones too.
No, but the composites is something that we'd like to get into. I don't know if you have any which have a cross section or that are halfway made or something like that. But I mean, it's interesting for people to see how all of these things are kind of put together as well.
I've got some photographs of a bow like the ones I was showing you, cut in half, an original one.
Okay.
And that's how we worked out what the insides are like. It's not my bow. It's there's a bowyer in America called Yarp Copperdreyer.
Oh yeah, I spoke to Yarp yesterday actually. I'm hoping to interview him this week. Yeah.
Oh, Yarp's lots of fun.
Yeah.
I went and stayed with him and his wife, and he's a real experimenter. He knows the complete Japanese archery, how to build the bows, the arrows, everything like that, inside out, and he can shoot correctly in the style that he likes. But with horn and sinew bows, he experiments. At Flight Archery, Archery, he and I always compete with each other, and he normally wins. I might admit, because he makes bows. I'm more interested in technique than actually making bows.
Yeah.
And I've started on the structure of making bows, mainly to solve technical problems that I have. But if Yup solves them for me, I'm quite happy. I mean, I don't have to own the bow. I just have to see it work properly.
Yeah.
And Yup will try out new ideas. And like, he makes wonderful bows. Lucas Novotny, who I think you've spoken to too.
Yeah.
Lucas is an artist making bows.
Absolutely.
I've seen bows he made like back in 2004, and back then he was making beautiful bows.
Yeah.
And I mean, Adam, of course, is a great bow maker. There's
of course,
no two ways about that.
Yeah.
And he's probably the deepest thinker about how the bows work of anyone I've ever spoken to. And I mean, we only email each other. I unfortunately haven't met Adam, but apparently it's very cold in Canada, so maybe I wouldn't like it. So
he was a really, really nice guy to interview. Very open about the knowledge and very cooperative. So
he shares so much knowledge.
Great guy, very, very nice guy. So we're glad to have him.
I bought some of his experimental bows because I'd never thought I'd own a shooting horn insignia bow. I mean, a friend gave me a Manchu one that was still shooting, but it's so old I don't want to shoot it. But Adam's bows, I think I got a world record with one of his bows. I've certainly won competitions with them. One is actually closer to Sinbo looking than anything. I'll see if I can find some good photographs and send them to you.
Yeah, we can look over that for the next meeting, hopefully. Yeah.
But,
excellent.
There's some. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to talk about a subject I'm interested in.
Excellent. No, I appreciate it, and I hate to kind of have to stop you, but it just makes it a bit easier, I think, if we can do like a part 1 and a part 2, so that people can digest it a bit more as well.
You're right. And you can put more structure in it. It's
exactly.
It's important. I've seen. I mean, I ramble, and a little bit of good editing can extract the information out of that.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I need to work on. But okay, excellent. Thank you, Bede. Thank you very much. Until next time we meet shortly. Okay. Appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
All right.